Welcome to the 7 Laws of the Learner video series. We're currently in Law 4, the Law of Retention. And now, here to tell you more about the Law of Retention is our teacher, Dr. Bruce Wilkinson.
We're on the funnest law, the law of retention. That is, how do you take some information when you want to pass it on in such a way that it doesn't just go on the sheets of paper that they're writing on, but it goes right inside of their mind and it stays there. How do you lock it in? This is part 2. Part 2 always deals with the practice. That is, how do you do the big idea? How do you help a class or even another person master the minimum? How do you boil down the content so you say, this is the truth you need to know? And then how do you take that, formulate it so that it goes right inside a person's mind and they master it? Then how do you make sure the whole class masters it? So that you could say to yourself, I am really causing them to learn. Well, before we give those secrets out to you, I'd like to show you a little chart that we've put together to try and explain how it typically happens. And I call this the normal class. The normal class. And what I try to do on this chart is to just outline what I used to do when I was in school and to blend it a little bit with the teacher. The first step would be for the teacher to gather the material that they're going to teach, have it all in front of them, and outline the material. Obviously, that is before, write this in your notebook, before class. Then the teacher would come to class and they would cover the material. They would cover the material, and the word itself is so poignant, isn't it? That if this was the material here that I'm supposed to teach you, I will bring it to class and I will cover it for you. And that is during class. Now, I don't know what kind of student you were, but I can be a little honest of what kind I was. And the rest of these are what I would do with my buddies in graduate school. That is, we would never look at the notes until the night before. And we would get together at Bruce Eberlein's house, because he had the biggest den. Well, he had the only den. And we would decide that tonight we'd learn the material for the test the next day. And we'll have asked older classmen what kind of test this professor gives, because he would never tell us. Because he would think the best way to be a good teacher is to hide what you think is important. So we would get together and we would get a bunch of pizzas, as you've already sensed, and some Cokes and Pepsis, and we would go through all of our notes page by page into the next box, figuring out the question, will he ask this question? And we would say, yes, I think he will. No, no, for sure he won't. Why did we have to do this? We had to do this because whenever any of us in school ever raised our hand and said, will this be on the test? The teacher always was offended. What do you mean, will this be on the test? You should know it all. No, you should not know it all. It is one of the most carnal thoughts a teacher can have, to say, I will hide from you what's important. And I'll make you waste your precious time memorizing things I know aren't important, but you may think I may think they're important. How carnal. How selfish. What should you do? Tell them, this is on a test. Guaranteed. This part here? No, this part here, essay. You ought to know this stuff. In fact, you ought to teach them, and if it's going to be on the test, then they ought to know it before they leave class. What are we paying you to do? So we would play games because the teacher thought the purpose of a test is to find out what you don't know. To design something to find out what you don't know rather than to find out, did you learn what I wanted you to learn? So we would prioritize it. Next thing we would do is after that is we would use the word mnemoniциze. Mnemoniциze means how to find a way so you could memorize it. Why did we do that? Because the teacher never did it. The teacher just dumped the material on us. And it was our problem to learn it. Because in his mind or her mind, she decided it's not my problem if you learn it or not, so why even bother with it? Here it is. So we would say, we go through all these lists and say, okay, who wants this list? I'll take this list. Who wants this? So we divide the list of all the information you need to know. After that, we would review it and review it and review it. Now, we would memorize it until we mastered it. Now, on your chart there, The next one is practice using it. In other words, getting the benefit of knowing it. We never did that in class. Why? Because the teacher thought the draw was to dump information, not the use of the information. So we'd rarely practice using the stuff we learned, and we'd hardly ever independently become skilled at using the course because we never practiced it with the teacher who could help us get over the threshold of using it. And all we did was tell you, here are the facts. But we didn't know how to use the facts. So if you could pick the four of us out the next morning out of a crowd of guys and girls going to the exam, because we had all this stuff. Don't bump me. Why? We knew if you even bumped us an inch, we'd lose half of it. We'd sit down, we wouldn't even breathe. And they'd hand out the papers, and they'd say, turn it over. And what will you do? You'd run to the longest list first, and you'd put down your way to remember it. Back to the list to remember it. They're all R's. This one over here, it spells Big Mac, and this one over here. And then all you'd have is a bunch of funny letters all over the place, or pictures. And you say to yourself, I've aced the test. And you never wrote anything down yet. Why? Because you knew you remembered the way to remember the material. And you aced the test, and you walk out, how'd you do? All right. Now, if you called these four guys back to that same test one day later, I could almost guarantee you from experience, we wouldn't have passed the test. Therefore, did the teacher teach? The teacher did not teach. Did we learn? Not only did the teachers play the dirty game, but we played the dirty game with them, and everybody lost. So what typically happens then is after class, the student does all those things. I believe there's a better way. That is, to gather the material, to outline the material, and then the teacher should prioritize the material and then mnemonize it, find a way for them to memorize it. That happens before class. So you come to class and you say, we're going to be talking about the book of Genesis. There are 47 things I want you to know about in Genesis. 22 of them are people. 13 of them are places. I'm going to have you memorize all of them in the next 18 minutes. At the end, we will take a quiz. If all of you do not get 100, we will do the routine. We will hold up the piece of paper that the quiz is on, and we will put our hand like this. And if you not ace it, then I want you to pull your hand in this direction, and we'll throw it away. We'll throw it away because I don't want in my grade book less than an A for my performance. Because I'm on test. You're not on test. Boy, would the kids love that or what? I'd love that. Then you practice using it. You spend half your time learning it and the other half the time using it. That's during class. What should homework be then, friends? Homework should never again be memorizing facts. Every time my kids come home to do the teacher's job, I just about go through the roof. Do not waste the time of the students doing their job. The homework assignment should be the independent use of that material. Okay, we went over 3 principles from the book of Genesis. I want you to pick out for your homework assignment any one of those life-changing principles, and I want you to write me a way in which that principle will change your life if you did it. Use the material. Now that you've learned it, we've talked about how it works. Now tell me how it works in your life. For homework assignment should be the use of the material. Now that's after class. Make sense? Good. Good. Joseph Bailey has a great comment about this. Never let school interfere with your child's education. Now remember, this law is only to be used sometimes. That is, when you're trying to put out a bunch of information into the mind of another person. There's a great quote by Lola May. It reads, there are 3 things to remember when teaching school. 1, know your stuff. 2, know whom you are stuffing, then stuff them elegantly. Now, how do you do that? It's a skill. And here are 5 steps. And then, if you would like, we'll share those 7 ways that God used. In the left-hand box, put down the teacher. Right-hand box, students. What do we typically do in the yellow arrow? Content dump. Please stop dumping the content. It doesn't work. 5 ways, 5 stages or steps you do to speed teach a person. Number 1 stage or step is always the material one. Material. That's where you as a teacher go out and do your research. You survey other people's ideas about it. And you basically prepare. You do your outline, etc. Your rough one. Right now I'm in the middle of working on a talk in which I'm trying to answer the question, what has to happen in the Middle East from now to the second coming of Christ? I have all this material, too much material. I have about 40 minutes to talk to people who go, half of them don't even go to church. Half of them have never heard of Nebuchadnezzar. How can I do that? 40 minutes, all these people. What should I do? I need to start sifting it. Not that stuff. Oh, that's a piece of gold. That part right there, they didn't know about that. They didn't know about the Battle of Armageddon. Oh, this one, they need to know about the Antichrist for sure. Got it? Take that stuff and put it on a diet. We get material so bloated. Number 2, minimum. Boil it down till you reduce it. You research it and then you reduce it. You survey it and then you start to select. Select the material you want. How do I do that? I think about my audience, how much time I got, and then take all these pieces of information I have and put an A next to the ones I say you have to know to say you know. A B you probably ought to know. A C, maybe. A D, An F, forget it. Even I'm not interested. Then how many things you have, that's what's left to begin forming with. When I made the walk through the Old and New Testaments, or the life of Christ, I remember doing that. I took his whole life of Christ and put in every single unit of thing he did, whether he went somewhere, he said something, he healed somebody. I think there was about 300 and some of them. Then I went down next to one of them and I said, I have an hour and a half to teach an audience the life of Christ, many of them who don't know much about the life of Christ. I went right down. What does a person have to know about the life of Christ to say, I got the life of Christ? A, B. That's how you do it. You select it. This is where you basically prioritize. Number 3. I couldn't find a word for number 3, so I made one up. I've always wanted to do this. And if it ever gets in Webster's, I'll know I've arrived. It is the word mind easy. Mind easy. That is, look up here for a moment. In the first box of material, you have this big blob of stuff. Now you start picking out things, and here is the stuff you want to transfer. Now, I can either give it to you like what everybody else does and just throw it at you and say good luck, or I can say, no, let me serve you now. Let me start to cause you to learn now. I'm getting ready to cause you to learn. Let me find a way to shape that material in how many different ways? 7. That's it. 7 different ways. So that it comes into your mind. It's easy for your mind to get it. It's mind easy. This is where you come through and you restructure it. This is where you simplify it. If it's hard to understand, you don't know the information well enough. Package it. Become a marketer. How does it look attractive? How does it come easy? Now, guess what? All that takes place before class begins. All that is before. Box number 4 is simply class. And at class, what do you want to do? You want to go over the material, obviously, but the goal in this law is that they memorize it. They memorize it.